All right, welcome back to, what are we calling this? Founding Principles? Founding Faith. Okay, I didn't wait.
With first principles.
Yeah, with first principles. There you go. That's good. So we're back here today. This is our second podcast. So today we have Amy Welborn with us, and Alicia. She's back from last week. Don't look at the camera, you said. So yeah, I'm not supposed to look over there.
Right, I'm trying not to.
Right. Just no. We're the whole goal here is obviously, as I think most people who are here by this point know, we're starting a school this September. Huge vision, Christian, tuition-free education in our community, and then big vision is for churches to catch on to this idea that you could, in your church, start a school, and it not be tuition-based private school, but it could be a tuition-free, donation-based private school, and that has come with lots of questions, and hence we're here to talk through those questions. So, how about we start today with Amy? I know you are excited to get started in this, but I would like to hear maybe just briefly your encounter to get here. So where were you before, with your own kids, your own life, whatever part you feel is pertinent to share with us, to say, how did you get to the point of being with us at First Principles? So there you go.
So lived in Oldham County for 32 years. I think that's right. Public educated. My husband's public educated.
And you made it.
And we made it. We went off
Survived.
to school, met at Purdue. Our kids are Oldham County High School graduates. I have one that's a welder and one that's studying nursing. And how I got here. So back during COVID, much like Michelle, who explained last week, that's how I met Michelle, was we were both concerned about many issues. Firstly, parent choice to be able to send our kid to school without a mask, without all the stipulations, speaking out, going to school board meetings, trying to engage the decision makers as to how we can improve the situation for the students. Fast forward, lots more things became more evident through that process of sitting in school board meetings that were much more significant than just a mask on a child's face, sadly. I've felt very convicted as I look back and see my children's education. I chose to stay home with my children when we were raising them instead of continuing as an engineer, and thought I was plugged in well in volunteering in multiple ways, both in church and school, sports, all the things. But in hindsight, a biblical worldview does not come easily. I think, try not to get choked up, but doing all the things and then sending your kid into the lion's den where many more things are bombarded on their minds than we can ever control. Not saying that a private school can control them either, but at least it's in an environment that's much more God-centered, biblical learning. My kids are good kids, but they aren't living out their faith. And pray for that every day. So when I was shoulder tapped by someone on our team, Lindsay, talking about a school, I don't know why, because everybody in my life has said, why are you doing this? It does no benefit to you or your husband or your children. And I said, the only thing I can think of is this community needs it. It will benefit our community in the long run. It's just what God's laid on my heart. And it's hard to put into words succinctly that I had the time, I had the passion. No, I get nothing out of this other than hoping my community is blessed.
Oh, I would just give you two things, though. If you think about like Moses, he didn't get anything out of leading the people
True.
of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. He was doing fine as a shepherd. He was doing fine in the palace before that. 40 years of his life in the palace, he's doing fine. 40 years in his life as a shepherd, still doing fine. 80 years old, God tells him to go back into Egypt and go lead them out. And then he gets to lead them through the wilderness for the last 40 years. I love those parts in like Numbers when the Lord's like, I'm done with Israel. I will wipe them out and make you, Moses. I'll make you a great nation. And there's Moses pleading with the Lord, Lord, don't do that. And I'm like, Moses, man, he was a good guy, because I would have been like, wipe them out, Lord. They're bad. So, but I would say to that, Amy, I think, one thing to consider is that, we're laying up treasures in heaven, and we're seeking first the kingdom of God. And that's the whole point. If we're looking for the like, what do my kids get out of this? Or, there's the big question mark in my household right now. Like, what about my kids? I still have 4 kids in school. Do I take my 4 and try to put them in the school? And if I do that, that takes 4 spots away from somebody else who could go. And so there's, just turmoil in my mind to say, what do I do there? And the point is not of this. The point of us starting the school is not me finding somebody else to educate my children, because I homeschool, finding somebody to educate my children. It's not, even though I have children, and you could look at it that way, but that's not where my mind is. We're doing kingdom work. We're laying up treasures in heaven. Our goal here is to do what God's called us to do. If he's called us to do it, then we should answer that call, even if we don't even maybe necessarily earthly benefit from that. And the Lord says what you do in secret, he rewards you openly. And I think we're going to see that reward in what we're doing. So, all right. So you got here into the first principles. Well, it wasn't first principles then, was it? I don't think y'all had that name.
Not at the beginning.
Yeah.
In
But
the beginning,
into the idea of starting a private school.
an opportunity in this area so people didn't have to drive so far. That was a big thing, was that I might have sent my kids to a private school if there had been one that I didn't have to drive all the way to Louisville for. Mm-hmm. But, everybody has their limits to what they can do and where they can go. And
yeah, our school's going to be the opposite of that. Can you drive way out into the country? So
it's not that far. It's actually just right off the highway. So
it's not that bad once you get used to it, but it's like a mental blockage for some people. Like, I got to go way down. It's halfway to Cincinnati, and I have to be like, you're not really that far. It's like one exit past LaGrange, y'all. But
It depends on where you're coming from.
yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, you start getting out in J-Town or something like that, you could be 40 minutes or so. But as of right now, there's lots of interest about our school, and there's people willing to drive pretty far distances to try to come. So be curious to see how all that's gonna come to be. So, and then we talked last week about the movement of how we got from starting a private school to the church being involved and that kind of vision. But I would just, one last question for you, Amy, before we kind of start talking about the questions we've been receiving, but would be, where you were at when we went from starting an individual private school with Lindsay and that group to then coming into the church, and now the vision got a little bigger. As we have these four. So Alicia's giving me the stink eye. We've gone from vision of this individual standalone private school to being part of the church, and then even bigger than that, part of the community that says we're going to open to the community. Mm-hmm. We're going to take donations, and we're not going to have the students pay the tuition so that kids can come. Opening it to non-believers so that we can teach non-believers the message of Christ. I think that's a huge part of that, being open to the public. And then even more so to say, okay, we're going to start in the church, and then into the barn phase 2, and then out on the hill phase 3, and then even more, maybe even a foundation for other churches to get involved and other churches to do the same. So where were you at inside? Like, you're still here? You didn't get up and leave. So how did you do going from private school to this?
I have this chain underneath the table, y'all. I'm stuck.
We told you not to bring that up.
No, I think for me, I mean, when you have a model that you see repeated over and over in different areas of the country, a tuition-based model, you think, okay, don't need to reinvent the wheel. Here it is. Let's do it. And that's where we were at the beginning, was following someone else's model. That seemed easy enough to comprehend and do, and then you come along and are like, no, let's do this tuition-based or non-tuition-based model, which someone on our team had already planted that seed at the very beginning of our what ifs when we were talking about a school. Clint Elliott had,
who's actually an elder.
Yeah, he's
At
one
the
of our
church.
elders.
He had that missionary vision. I had to go and apologize to him after about a year. I literally did. I was like, well, you saw that all along, and we pretty much ignored you, and I'm really sorry, but we
was
just
hard to wrap
couldn't
your
wrap
head.
our heads around it because we were looking to the experts on how to do what it is.
And
So
those are great things. We're not challenging the private school that charges tuition. We're just simply saying it's not enough yet. There's more to go. There's as we keep saying, there's 55 million students going to public education every day, and we understand that some of them have to for one reason or another. And our 150 student school in Oldham County or Henry, I don't really know where we're at. We're like on that border, but our one Christian school is not necessarily the fix for that 55 million.
Right.
But we believe the church is.
church at large.
The church at large, yeah. Not the church Salt and Light, the church, but the church, the hands and feet of Christ that is planted all over this country. If the church would get behind this, then we can be the answer to that 55 million.
Which is what I think you actually, how we came on, is that you are representing, Salt and Light. You're saying, as a church, you basically told us, we don't want it to be a transactional thing. That's basically what you told us.
Your kid
We're
gets
a
to come
church.
because you paid us tuition.
Right. That's not how the church is operating, and that's not how we're ever going to operate. That's what you told us. We're never going to operate that way. And so,
Well, it also engages the parents more, I think, to be able to feel like you are a part of this effort. It's not just drop off your kids and pick them up. I mean, there will be people who are working and have to do such, but that they can still be engaged in dialogue about how things work and how they can be involved in some aspect.
And honestly, not just can be involved, but will actually kind of have to be involved.
Right.
There's lots of aspects of this that the parents will have to be involved.
And nurturing the faith of the whole family.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I'm one of those that went to church every week and Sunday school. And I would just say in the last couple of years of digging into the Word, I realized how much I didn't get growing up. And for whatever reason, I think every person has a chance to grow and learn. And this Foundations for American Christian Education has a lot of opportunities, not just to teach kids, but to teach families as well.
yes.
Yeah. I think it's really great. And I think, too, and we'll get to this here in a few minutes, I think there's the other aspect of that, too, is engaging not just the parents, but also the teachers. This is no longer just a job. This is a mission. This is no longer just I went to school to be an educator, and so I'm fulfilling that thing that I went to school to do. I got my degree in. There's a bigger calling here than my career or my job. And so I think that will help. It's engaging the parents, it's engaging the teachers, and then also it's going to help to engage those students to look at learning in a different way. It's not just the thing that you have to go. There's plenty of kids in public school that have to go to school because the government says if you're under 16 years old in the state of Kentucky, you have to go to school. You can't just up and leave. It's a law. It's 16 years old. Under 16, you have to be in school. And so then they've made an institution and said you have to be there. But this isn't a place that you have to be. As a matter of fact, for the first several years, anybody local, you'll be one of the few that could get in. And so it'll help engage the students to say, I don't know if I should word it this way or not, but I don't have a better way to say it right now. It's a privilege to be able to be here. You got to be here. And honestly, if that student doesn't want to respond well to that learning environment, well, there's 10 others in the wings that would be willing to take your spot. And so I think you'll be engaging the parents, you'll be engaging the teachers, and you're going to engage the students by doing what we're doing. Because it's not just the wealthier who can say, well, we could pay for all that tuition and we could afford that, and we have somebody that could get our child there. We've opened it and said, no, if you can come, we want to teach you. And so I think that, by the way, that also goes into the message that Christ has given us, which is freely we received and so freely we should give. So that doesn't make it free, though. It's not a free endeavor. We'll talk about giving at the end. Do you have anything else you want to add about your journey to this place?
Sure. One thing, as you were talking, that made me think, is like teachers go to school because they want to become a teacher. And if they're Christian, they also are thinking about how can I, do my job. And not everybody gets that opportunity to be a Christian educator. I went to school for engineering, and then I took a turn in the road when I stayed home with the kids and became an artist. And I love creating art and knowing that it's blessing somebody in some way, which is another story. But all along, I think most people, whatever their career path is, you think, how am I serving God best? Is this selfish? Is this what I'm doing for me? Is it benefiting? Is this what God is wanting me to do? And I feel like this opportunity is really cool, because it's not just creating some pretty thing that I go out and sell. It's actually has nothing to do with me, but it's helping do something with God.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Brings purpose to what we're doing. I do love that. Well, I think today we want to start with teacher requirements and grade levels. It's been a question that we keep getting often in two forms, and so we'll just start with Alicia. You've been quiet today, so I'll let you talk. So let's talk about
quiet.
I'm trying to be quiet. Y'all sit here and be. I'm just gonna be.
So we've announced that we're opening this school K through 12, and that has come with lots of questions. One of them is why? Like, why in the world would we go K through 12? Why not, K through 3 or K through 5? Or so maybe I'll just
Or
turn
like
to
you
this.
said, start with the preschool.
Yeah,
A lot of
or
people
start
are
with the
like,
preschool.
Start with the preschool. Well, I think it was the need. It's like we see that the need. There's a lot of middle schoolers in need, and I would think the younger high school grades are in need. So I think we're trying to serve a need. Are we doing the harder thing? Yes. Are we doing the much harder thing? Absolutely. But we are trying to serve a need, and we're trying to partner with the Lord on his vision. And, the vision is big. The vision is for all the children who need to be in school to begin providing for them with a biblical education through the church. So I think that's the reason, or at least that's how I see the K through 12. Is it, like I said, is it going to be the way more challenging than just starting with the preschool? Absolutely. Or even just starting K through 3. But
Yeah, and as somebody who's been doing the curriculum side of things, like maybe just for a moment speaking to that you were just saying that even a little bit ago before we started about how, in grade school, teachers look different.
right, there's a whole different approach really in the younger grades. In elementary, you'll have one teacher and she'll teach all the subjects. And in our particular methodology, it'll be more challenging for her too, because she's going to be learning new things too, new methodologies. But when you get into the upper grades, you have teachers that are specialized. You have someone who's specialized in science, or who has specialized in English, or history, or different things like that. So we need those teachers to rise up to really be able to benefit the students. You don't have just a teacher teaching everything. So it does become more complex and complicated. And we need, you're looking for specific people. Types of people, and you asked will the criteria be? We would love for people to have a couple of years of teaching experience under their belt, as far as being able to plan lessons and work with students. Are we going to say they have to be certified? Not necessarily. We're interested in that. Obviously, the more qualifications, we're looking for people who have passion, who are going to be who are missional, be on mission with us in their heart, and and we're looking for people who love the Lord and love children. We're teaching children. We're not teaching curriculum. We're teaching children. And
that's a good way to word that.
it's really an important thing to keep in mind, and for our teachers to keep in mind. That curriculum is not the end all be all. We're teaching children, and we want to teach children with their hearts, with their hearts and their minds. Engage them, and the methodology that we're using is a discipleship methodology, and I think it makes it transformative for the teacher too. It starts with us as the teachers, not that I'm necessarily going to be a teacher, but meaning the teachers are first the learners. We have to be the learner and be humble enough to learn ourselves to be able to teach and disciple. So we're also looking for that humility, that even though maybe someone comes with 20 years experience, but can we come and be humble and learn a new methodology with the Lord and with his word and disciple our children through whatever subjects God's given us, because God tells us he tells us to take dominion of this earth. I think what we as teachers now have to do is take dominion of our subjects through the word of God. And that hasn't happened, at least it isn't happening in the typical school, because that has never been part of the philosophy or the requirement in a typical school.
Yeah, you've even kind of said it this way before, that in some ways, maybe having somebody that's not necessarily certified. And by the way, just to clarify on that, to have a private school, which by definition we are, though we're open to the public, we are not part of the public school system.
Right.
So this would be labeled under a private school, or if it's a hybrid school, then it could even be labeled under a homeschool. You, the parent, would be homeschooling your child according to the Board of Education. You'd be bringing them to our hybrid school, and that would be based on number of hours that the classes will be per day or number of days a week.
Right.
All of that goes into whether or not you're a hybrid school or a private school. But either way, in either of those situations, homeschool or private school, you do not have to be a certified teacher. I think a lot of people are confused by that. They think at the moment I say, well, we don't have to hire certified teachers, you see this look like, we're not hiring certified teachers. Well, at most of the private schools, you are not dealing with certified teachers in that way. They don't carry the certificate to say that they're a certified teacher. And so and by the way, just because you're in a public school setting doesn't mean that all those teachers are certified. They have workarounds for that too. I remember several years ago, my dad and myself both we were doing work for the school, and they wanted to know if we wanted to do we used to do upholstery work. Well, my dad still does. And they wanted to know if we would come in and teach things, like teach a class. And that led into this further conversation, like, well, we're not teachers. And like, well, you don't have to be. And then they even said, if you've been a business owner for, I think they said 2 years or 3 years, then that could qualify you, that you could come in and teach if you had, if you'd been in business for so many years. So they have, or even in the public school setting, they have workarounds of that, whether or not somebody is certified or not. I think the point, like you said, what we want is passion and humility to say, hey, we want to do things right, not just because it's the way they've always been done. And we want to teach children. That's the whole point. At the end of the day, we want to teach children, and we want to teach them in the best way possible. And just because somebody we're not saying a certification is bad. We're just saying just because you have that certification doesn't make you necessarily the best pick. We want to find the best pick. Right. Who's that best teacher? And so in the elementary age, it gets to be, maybe one teacher for the whole first grade class or second grade class. But then you get into the higher grade levels, which we're trying to do. We're trying to take on 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 at the same time. And those students have to come with, well, we need somebody who knows math, who specializes in math or science.
Right. We definitely need equipped people.
Well, you could have a teacher that has world experience, like somebody that's an engineer or whatever. I'm not saying I'm going to teach, but they could teach chemistry or biology and math or, 2 or 3 subjects, because they do have some overlap in the real world.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole thing too. That's the Lord providing us the right people, right? Because you'll know that's the right person when you've been struggling to find somebody for this, this, and this. And then one guy comes in and he's got all of them. And you're like, that's our person.
Exactly.
And that's really from headmaster and down through all the grades. I mean, we want the Lord to put the right person in the right place.
Yes, to bring the right people. And we have to trust that he is and will, because we can't do it without the right people. This is bringing the body together to be able to accomplish the work of the church. And so bringing the body together is very important for the functioning of that. And who are we to say, if the Lord really brought somebody with all kinds of great skills and talents, and that's what he's doing, who are we to say, oh, you don't have a piece of paper with a signature on it, right, that says you're, but we do want people to be teachers at heart, to love children or to love what they're doing. And we've had people come up and they're like, the best time in my life was when I was working with kids, when I was teaching. Maybe they aren't doing that anymore, but looking back in their life, they're like, that was the most fulfilling time in my life. Like, that's beautiful, I think.
Right.
It's like, oh, I want to hear more,
Yeah. I think that's really good. And I just think that kind of like what you were saying. I mean, I can't imagine if somebody came from a private school setting and they've been teaching for 10 years in a private school setting, but they don't have a certificate of some sort. Then they come in and they want to teach at our school, and we're going to say, well, we've set this stipulation that says we can only hire certified teachers.
Right.
That does not make sense to any of us, not just me, but to any of us. I think we're all of our school and our church is on board to say we want quality teaching, and the only way to have that is to really look at the person, to interview the person, and to
Right.
know where they are, where their heart is, and do they have a heart for teaching, or is this the thing that's next on their career path? I don't think there's a whole lot of people that are going to be coming to us with this as the next stepping stone
For their career path.
for their career path. I don't think it's that. I mean, we want to pay our teachers and we want to pay well, but that
Right.
doesn't. I just
Right.
don't see a whole lot of people being like, I want to go to the startup school out in Oldham County, and that'll be the next stepping stone. I don't think it's that. I think we need people who have a heart for missions and have a heart for this mission locally, because that's really what this is. I mean, this is
It's a local mission.
and a huge one. I think the biggest that we or anyone locally has really ever taken on. It may not seem that way even by this September, but a few years from now, I think it'll be recognized like this is a huge mission that we're taking on.
Yes. I mean, right now we're planting, and when you plant, you really don't see what's underground, right? And you don't see what you're planting. You know, this is the unseen side of it right now. And also, my husband reminded me, we're up here in Oldham County on a hill. Our ground is so hard, and there's a lot of hard ground around here, really. And I think that's a lot.
You're being symbolic. I like
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot of metaphor there, really. It's like there is a lot of hard ground. But I also found just in my own life that there was a lot of hard ground in me, too. And like you said, coming to a biblical worldview is not easy when you've been.
Having to admit you don't have a biblical worldview
Yeah,
on
it's
some
not.
things.
Yeah, and you've been
that's
going
hard.
to church and been a Christian for a long time, but so coming to that is not easy within yourself. And
Can I even say, I didn't even know the term biblical worldview until a couple of years ago.
I thought that was great. We went on that trip. We went and visited a school, and I threw out I don't remember why I said it, because I think I was teaching a co-op class. And I was doing worldview. I can't remember why I said it. And you said to me, you were like, I keep hearing this word worldview everywhere I look. It keeps
It's
showing
like
up.
it just keeps showing up, and I'm like, I've never heard it talked about before until.
I need to keep you around when everybody asks me the question, how do you know when the Lord's talking to you? Well, here's one, when he continues to bring the same word over and over and over again. And
That's a good point.
Yeah, we kind of experienced that with the tuition thing, like you talked about earlier. Clint had brought that up in the beginning, and then it comes back up
Yes.
again. And I think that understanding that we need a biblical worldview is step one, but then understanding, do I have a biblical worldview? That can be really tough because our pride gets in the way, and we want to say, like, I have a biblical worldview.
So, FACE, Foundations for American Christian Education, highly recommended that everybody on our team do this assessment in biblical worldview through the Nehemiah Institute. And so you do that, maybe takes an hour or less to go through how many questions?
Yes, I don't
Like
remember.
say there's 70 questions. I don't remember exactly, but so you do it, and there was a lot of questions that were like, I don't even know what they're asking. How do I answer when I don't know what they're asking? You go through the whole thing. And I think there were 5 categories at the end you get graded on, like economics, biblical, education maybe, politics. There was one more.
I know there was one was religion, but they're different aspects.
So then you get graded on those, and you can see the questions you got wrong. And I really thought of all the work I've done studying the Bible, everything, that would be my best category. It was my worst.
Oh,
I felt awful. I got a C-. I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I don't think the point is for you to feel awful. I think the point is to say,
It's a learning.
Yeah,
It's a learning tool.
yeah. And by the way, speaking of teacher requirements, that will be a requirement for all of our teachers.
And our staff.
And our staff.
We're going to ask everybody to take that assessment.
Everybody has to take that assessment.
And be willing to look at where you are.
It is humbling.
It is.
Yeah. And
It is
also I think, too, it'll be assessment for the hiring process, but it'll also be assessment for the training process.
Yes.
Just because somebody gets a C- in biblical, it doesn't mean they can't be a part. It just means, hey, we know what we need to work on. And that's where that humility side comes in, where we need passion and humility for somebody who wants to teach and says, I want to teach a biblical worldview. Maybe I didn't even know what that meant before, but I want to know. And I think we really want to find people who feel called to this, just like we feel called into this. I think we want to find the same thing, those persons who feel called And so we're trying. We just had a meeting. You guys just had a meeting. I wanted to be in there. I couldn't be in there. It was on Wednesday night. But,
Sorry. Okay, next time.
so maybe I could just ask you to share about that for a moment. How do you feel like that went? You had some come on a Wednesday night. You've got another one coming on the 23rd. Is it Zoom?
The next one's Zoom. We really like the in-person. I think we really did like the in-person. So although we have the next one as a Zoom, I think we want to do another in-person. It's really nice to meet people and
You and I could talk about that. There might be a way to blend those two.
Okay,
But you
'cause
could
we
do
really
you could do
enjoyed
it in person
meeting
with a Zoom, and that way people at a
Okay.
distance could be zoomed in, but you could also be
because
talking
we want
to
to
the
make
room.
it convenient for people, and we want to.
That could be an option. We can talk about that later. But
Okay.
So another one on the 23rd, but you just had one.
We did just have one. I thought it went really well.
It was attended well. I think we had
was.
12 interested teachers. The teacher that sat next to me doesn't even own a computer. She doesn't want a computer. And she was asking, well, how can I take the
Learn
next
the next
step,
step.
which is a course that
You're
is
gonna have to
called
get a computer.
Renew Your Mind in Teaching and Learning. And so I'm now, like, in my head processing, maybe we should have a little book club / Bible study on Renew Your Mind
Yeah.
and Teaching and Learning.
We need to do
that's
a
in
live
person,
one.
because I think it would be very fruitful to.
I do too. It is a self-directed study. You can do that on your own. It was designed that way, but honestly, everybody's lives are so busy, and it's really just an accountability to be in there and do it with them. This is another thing we'd like all of our teachers to do. It's like a 10-week renewing the mind for teaching and learning. But it's also it's discipleship. It's discipling your heart in the Word, and your heart for children, and making sure you have a Christian idea of a child, of a human, of that you have a Christian philosophy of education and learning what does that look like and what can that be, and then having a biblical worldview. There's going to be other people that don't really know what that means. It's you're not the only one, and so there's that time. It's almost like a paradigm shift has to take place in us, because we've been raised one way in school and in education, and that's how we see Christian education or education in general. And we're actually going to have a paradigm shift in education. So that's what the Renewing the Mind class is for. But we do agree that if we can make time for it, we'd like to have something that we can be in person with people. Like doing a little Bible study with people with that.
Yep.
We
Well-
just completed that Renew Your Mind. It was the last lesson was this week. And she had us recap. I know you couldn't be on the call, but she had us just one thing you've gleaned from this study. I would love to hear, because she's trying to understand how well she did her job. And mine was, and it really started with you. Yeah. So I know the word providence, and I know that, God's out there and everything works in his timing. But the fact that you pointed out that providence and God's hand in bringing America into the fold, and how that all, historically was abstract to me. And, it was never taught.
Right.
And so then she goes through that in the Renew Your Mind, and she points it out in multiple places. And I said, for me, I mean, that was a biggie. And I want to dig into that more. I want to see more places where you can say, yep, there and there and there.
Right.
I mean, and it can be personal as well.
Right.
So.
Right. And we do that with the children, because the children get to see that, and it brings identity. I think the biggest attack right now on our children is identity.
Oh.
You just see it. They're attacking their identity even as a person.
From the ground up.
Yes. So, the hand of God, you see in the history that God has been working, and you're shown that, and you are here for a reason and a time such as this. And all of a sudden you're valued. Right. So we want our children to feel they are valued. God has them here for such a time as this and has a hand on them. And we want their future to be bright with the Lord. And that wasn't offered us in school. At least it wasn't offered me in school.
You can't get there when you've slowly removed God from every aspect. Then you can't say, well, there's ultimately a purpose, because whose purpose would it be?
Right.
Like, to have a purpose would mean there has to be someone behind that for there to be a purpose. But when we've said in this kind of slow cooker kind of method, where we've said, well, there is no God in creation, we can't say that there's a creation. the argument that always gets thrown out is, well, if we're going to teach your God and your creation, then we have to, in a public school setting, we have to teach all these other gods. And I've been saying for the past couple of weeks as I've heard that, well, public schools couldn't teach God the way that you want, because then are you going to want your kid to sit in a witchcraft class? And I say, no, absolutely not, because I know that teaching our God is truth, and everything else would then be a lie. So no, I'm not going to agree to teaching another type of a lie. That gets into politics, right? Like,
Right.
I'll give you this one if you give me that one. But in the reverse, we've now ended up with, okay, well, we'll let you take ours away,
Right.
because you want to make sure that you're not in any way offending, and hence the need for the church to be involved again.
Absolutely.
This is why it should be a mission of the church. It's funny, last week, you guys, I went to your all's Sunday school class. I don't know if you call it Sunday school, small group, whatever you want to call it. It's on a Sunday morning.
I call it Sunday school.
I'm like a Baptist. I'm like, yeah, it's Sunday school. That's what we do, right? Like Sunday morning, it's Sunday school. And as people look at me weird sometimes, they're like, Sunday school? And I'm like, Sunday. You've never heard of Sunday school? What? I'm not that old. But anyways, I was in your class, and you had brought up how I really needed to read Eric Metaxas' Letter to the American Church. And
Did you
so right there in class, I downloaded it. I don't have time to read that book right now.
Right.
I wish that I did, but I'm a little stretched. And so, but I did get the audio version, and I clipped out the last 4 minutes-ish of the second chapter. I actually wanted to bring it today and try to play it, but I didn't have a means to do it. But I did clip it out of there. It's like the last 4 minutes of the second chapter.
Maybe we can put it in on the end.
Maybe. Yeah. He has a kind of scathing review for the church not being involved in education. As we've seen these things happening, we've seen this degrading that's happening, and the church has sat silent and done nothing. And that's our purpose. I think that's the reason for such urgency in us. When we get back to that K through 12, why K through 12? I think there's an urgency in us. Like you said, because of the need. I feel like because from my perspective, we're finally doing what we should have been doing already. If you talk to a church today, if you look at a church planter and you say, what are the things that are needed? Educating our next generation is not part of that list. Do we have discipleship classes? Do we have Sunday school class? Do you have teaching space? What's your parking look like? These are the questions that we're asking. I'm telling you, as a church planter, as somebody who planted a church, these were the things that were asked of me. But diving into not just my personal children, but into a child's education and bringing God into their education is no part of church planting. None. And how could it be? Nobody's literally no church. When I say nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but the church at large is not doing this. They don't view it that way. We don't view it that way. I think that's where the urgencies come in to go, oh my, we should have been doing this.
Yeah, maybe God's doing a new thing everywhere, and it needs to be a part of church mentality, because children, are we disregarding children as people?
Or are we pretending like 2 hours throughout the whole week?
Enough.
An hour on
It is
Sunday and an hour on
absolutely not.
Wednesday.
Which I personally thought was my role
Yeah.
growing up, that's what I had to do. And that would check the box, and and talk about it at home. Obviously, that when you handed out that book and I grabbed it, the Letter to the American Church, I posted this 3 days ago on Facebook, and this is just in the introduction, and I was like, oh yes, it's far easier to ignore God's call than to acknowledge it and rise to fulfill it. But it is more difficult and painful than anything to live with the results of ignoring God's call.
Well, he talks about, I wish I had it in front of me, because he talks about the German church sitting silent. He's a scholar on Bonhoeffer's life, who was a pastor during the time of, Germany's fall to Holocaust. And he was actually a pacifist pastor. So he didn't believe in any violence at all. And he was watching what was going on and trying to wake up the church. And I think he even came to New York City, left Germany, and had a whole time there. Eric is, he is really trying to wake up the church through the lens of what happened in Germany. Because in Germany, basically the only way Holocaust could have happened was for the good people to stand up and do nothing.
Yeah.
The only way it could happen is that the church remained silent. And
then it did.
And then it did. And so shame on them. And now there's this big shame on Germany. But, it's really, you can't expect the world to take care of the problems
We
that
can't be
only
mad at the
correct-
world for acting like the world.
No. So it's only on the church,
Mm-hmm.
us as Christians in the body, to remediate or remedy, to provide the remedy,
Mm-hmm.
and to, what is the word? I want to say, like, to protect what is God's. The children are God's. It's our job to protect them. And it isn't the public school's job. If they don't claim God and they don't claim Christ, how can we expect them to carry our morals or our values
Right.
if they don't claim those things? How can
Right.
we expect them to teach those things?
Right.
And to guard those things. And we're seeing right now that they aren't guarding things that are precious to us, and it is affecting innocent children.
Right.
And some parents have no idea. And so as a community, the church's job is to take care of the community they're in and educating. And I agree, like 1 hour on Sunday and an hour on Wednesday or whatever is not enough when, everything is going on that's going on.
And just for a second, consider how important even the government views the education of our children. that they would insist that our children go. And I mean, we could get into the money side of it and things like that, but I would just say that obviously somewhere down the line, somebody thought they were doing right. Somebody thought they were. I'm not saying they were, but the church has just backed off and said, well, when it comes to the education of our children, everyone else can do that, but the church doesn't have to take a stance in that. Even when the church was being pushed out, didn't stand up. There was a time when the church was in the public school system, but as it was shoved out of the public school system, we've just let it happen.
Yeah, because it's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just let them take care of everything. Also, the same thing as how welfare got here, because the church,
Money
it's
talks,
really,
too.
the church wasn't doing it. And it's hard for us to take care of people on our own, but it's really what the church does.
Yeah.
Right? But then we let government do it, and then we're just like, well, so then when someone comes with a need, you're like, well, go
Yeah.
to the government,
Right. And so then we end up with church programs, and forgive me for being so blunt, but we're like, oh, but we have softball. Well, I mean, that's great that you have softball, but is that our mission? I mean, did God really call us to have softball leagues and gaga ball pits and 9 square? Is that really, I mean, that's taking on the gates of hell? Is that, we have walking on Tuesdays? And I know that's probably really, there's probably some pastor right now listening, be like, why are you saying that about us? But I'm just saying, is that really our call? And I know plenty of pastors who will say, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing all this other stuff? What are we doing? Well, that goes back to the point. We want to do something.
Well, doesn't Jesus say, let the little children come unto me?
Suffer the little children to come unto me. Let that sink in.
What does the word suffer mean in that case?
Where's your dictionary?
Tell me. You want me to go get my big dictionary? I'll look it up.
I think it means that you would put yourself out there, that you would allow yourself to be inconvenienced.
Right.
Because that was the problem. All the little children were coming up to Jesus, and the disciples tried to shoo them away. And Jesus said, no, suffer.
Because we can think they're inconvenient, right? That's a real easy view of children.
Sure.
And so I think that's a big thing with FACE is they recommend we all read. They have a nice, I don't know if it's a book, I think it's a document, but it's the Christian idea of a child, the view of a child. What is a Christian view of a child? Mm-hmm. And it goes along with a biblical worldview. And so how do you see the child? And I don't know if you're aware, but really the state religion, I think it's a state religion, doesn't necessarily view us as having a soul.
Oh, right.
So, we're kind of animal, really, right? With evolution and eugenics, we're really kind of soulless.
There's no question to that.
Exactly.
This is another podcast. We need to save that
but
for another day.
it's something that you have to take, and it's another reason why the church is called, right? Because
Agreed.
we're not going to get something out of our children being in those schools that we want as Christians, because they don't have that philosophy of education to give them.
Right. And it kind of goes back to that purpose thing again. If we don't have that purpose, if our purpose is not to glorify the Lord and his kingdom, if we're not trying to teach a hymn, if we're not trying to involve God in the education, then what are we doing? And
right.
So, yeah, I think teachers, obviously we want a K through 12 school. That's the goal. That's the big vision.
That's the big vision.
And then, there's the question that happens from everyone that says, like, well, can't you just start smaller? Can't you just can't you just start with K through 3 or K through 5? And I think the answer to that is, sure, we could. That's the easier thing to do. That's the easier road.
Right.
That's us taking the vision that God's given us, the urgency God's given us, and shrinking it down to what
What's
we think
convenient.
and what we think we could accomplish.
Right.
And the question here is not what I think I can accomplish or what I think you can accomplish or even our team can accomplish.
Right.
I continue to go back to that thought of Gideon and his army in the book of Judges. And, God says, no, your army's, he felt like his army was already too small to go against the Philistines. And then God says, no, your army's not too small, it's too big. And he says, shrink it down. You remember that?
Then they had the one that's we're lapping. Is
Yeah,
that
remember the one he tells. He
that-
says that if
the
people,
one is still looking at
if they pulled the water up to their mouth, that was the third one, right? If they
Okay.
pulled the water up to their mouth, then they could stay. But anybody who stuck their face down the water, tell them to go home. Do you remember what the first one? I told you this one before. Remember what the first group was? Because he did it 3 times. He said, your group's still too big. Tell them to go home. Now do another one. Tell them to go home. And the third one was the water. Do you remember what the first one was, though?
No. Well,
Oh, here we go. Ready?
yeah.
If they're scared, tell them to go home.
Oh, I would have been going home.
First thing he said, sit down, Amy.
We would have been going home. 'Cause we're scared.
Yeah, he said to them, he said, look, tell your army that if they're scared to go home. And he shrunk them all the way down. Do you remember how many people he brought that army down to?
No.
300. 300 against thousands.
From what? What was it?
I can't remember.
But God wanted to show off.
That's right. He said it's too big for me to get the glory. And so he brought it down to 300 people. And then, then they're there with pots and torch in one hand and a pot in the other hand. This is what they're going to go into battle with, a torch and a pot, not sword and shield, but torch and pot. And they go off into battle. Remember, they all broke their pots and they all yelled as loud as they could. But the other army got so confused. They thought they were all coming to attack them. And so they ended up trying to run away and they ended up attacking each other. And they literally killed themselves off. And Gideon's army wins. 300 men win against, thousands. And God had told them, if God does it that way, it's not a commander. It wasn't Gideon who was the brightest. He had the best fighting skills. It wasn't that. It was God who got the glory. And I think, again, that's where we are. I was just telling Amy this earlier. I said, there's all these things that could go wrong. And it could, I think you used the word, you're kind of worried this could implode on itself. And it could. That's right. The reverse of that is then when those things go through, when the building permits go through, when the funding comes in. I don't know what I'm supposed to say besides funding.
It's fine.
Pick another word. But
Donations.
when the donations come through, when the finances are there, when the students there, when the teachers are there, and all those pieces do fit together, then the only testimony you have looking back is, I could have never done that. God had to do it.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the end result. And if it's not, then I think the other part of it is this part we want to express to everyone too, then we'll pivot. We'll shift.
Right.
If we don't have enough funding, but we have all the other things, then maybe we shift. Maybe we do go down to K through 5, but that's not the vision God gave us. We're not going to start from a position of saying, how do we do K through 5 and then tack on more? We would go from a position of saying, we're trying to go K through 12. If that doesn't work, if God wants something different, then we'll pivot and we'll bring it down to what God has enabled us to do.
Right. I think he's given us a vision to be enduring. And so this K through 12 vision is a big vision, and it's a lasting vision. Mm-hmm. If this first year we have to pivot, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're planting. We're in those beginning years. It's okay. It's not a shame. It's not, oh, we failed. But I think also, you've really called us to step out in faith. Interesting enough, we've been in Hebrews for a long time, and
I'm looking forward to chapter 11.
yeah, I was going to say, it's all there, and that's what God honors, and that is a very challenging message, is what is faith? What does it look like? God, he shows it in Hebrew all the way back to Abel. He's like, and Abel had faith when? And,
By faith, Abel offered a more
Yeah.
perfect sacrifice.
Right, and there's all these people that by faith. So it is what God honors. Mm-hmm. We can't twist God's arm and say, make it happen our way. Or, we can't, God has to do whatever he's going to do. We are just serving him and the vision we believe. Mm-hmm. And there's enough of us that have come together in that faith that we're partnering with him to bring his vision.
That's right.
To bring his vision here. And if we have to pivot this year, no harm done. We pivot, but we are throwing out the the big vision. And
We've pulled out the big
faith.
guns.
We've pulled out the big guns. It's very scary in the flesh. And I am definitely Little Miss Much Afraid. I don't know if you've ever read that book, Hans Feet in High Places, Little Miss Much Afraid. But I'm definitely her. But I want to be that person of faith. I want to honor God with my faith. And that's an ongoing thing. You know, faith is something that it's active in us. And so
One step at a time.
yeah, and works do come from that faith, right? James says, you know, someone without works can't. Where's your faith? So it's not meant to be a works, but it's a work of God that we're partnering with Him together, and we need a whole lot more. God, there's way more pieces to come together. People that are meant to be with us and meant to be a part of this that are going to arise and come together and join us in this faith. And I think, you know, 5 years from now, we'll look back and we'll be like, wow. I believe. And we may be looking back September and being like, wow.
Oh, I think the wow moments just continue to come for a while. You know, maybe 20 years from now, we look back and we're like, wow, you know, like now we've kind of calmed down, but I think we got a road ahead of us.
Yes, we do have a road ahead of us.
And part of that's too, because the Lord's given us a big vision. Honestly, K through 12 it was funny as we kind of began discussing through that, it was like everything was not enough. You know, like
right.
K through 5 is not enough. K through 8 is not enough. K through 12 is not enough. It's not enough students. You know, there's so many students that if bringing God into education really is best, then how can you limit that to any number? We want every church across America. Listen, big vision, I'd love to see all 55 million students coming to Christ through their education. That's what we want. We want the church at large stepping up and saying, you have a place to come here and to be educated. And this is not your only availability of that is not just the public school system. There's another alternative. And so we'll see.
And the tuition-free part, which is a big jump. It is a big jump. But like you said, how many people really can afford private education? And it's great if you can, please donate. But a lot of people can't. It's just a reality. And it costs a lot to run a school and to run it well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk, before we get into the cost, let's talk about the accreditation, being accredited.
Okay.
That's been a big question on a lot of people's minds. Are we going to be accredited? Are you going to be an accredited school? I put it out on Facebook the other day and asked and said if anybody has questions. Some people texted those to me. Some people put them there on Facebook. Some people emailed. But over and over again, the question, are we going to be accredited? And I think that is, I think it's misunderstood what that actually means and what that is, who can do it and who can't do it. So I'll just let you all speak for a minute and say, who would want to speak into that about being accredited as a school? Go ahead, Amy. Yeah, why don't you get us started on, what that actually means to do that?
Well, to start with FACE, we know that their schools are accredited, that they're 2 flagship schools that have been around for 30, 40 years. Is that correct? But that's a process. And you can't just out of the gate start as an accredited school.
And just repeat that one more time. You can't.
You cannot start your first year as a pilot school as an accredited school.
Right.
It's a process. Accreditation, you have to be a functioning school. You have to have so many years under your belt, depending on which entity you're paying to help you check all the boxes to become accredited. So we would have to be at least 3, 4, 5 years into the process to be able to become accredited. That might be something down the road, but we can't approach that right now. There's much to be accomplished prior to becoming accredited school. So, as you said, a lot of private schools are not accredited. It's not a mandate. It's a choice.
Right. It's not, So in the state of Kentucky, it's not a law for a private school to be accredited.
Correct.
It does not have to be that way. Now, we can't speak into other states. I don't know what other states may have or not have. But in our state, you do not have to be accredited to be a school. And so that's the same way with a homeschool. If someone's homeschooling their children, they don't have to be accredited in the same way private schools do not have to be accredited in that way. So it's not a law, number one. Number two, we couldn't be, even if we wanted to be. And then the last part of that is also, I think a lot of people maybe are misrepresented on are misunderstood on what being accredited means, as if there's like some entity that is accrediting everyone, but that's really not the truth either.
No.
There's lots of accreditation, and what was the word you used earlier, Alicia? You said there's a lot of I can't think of the word you used. There's a lot of red tape. I feel like.
Bureaucracy.
That's the word I
Yeah.
would
Bureaucracy. There's a lot of bureaucracy around becoming accredited, and I think from what I've heard and looking into it is that they've kind of made it more and more. That's a growing thing. So actually, some schools that are accredited are considering getting out of the accreditation because it's taking so much time. There's so much rigmarole. They're having them jump hoops through. So
To keep their accreditation,
yes,
they have to
yeah.
do
I mean,
certain
it's a whole
things.
system. It's
Yeah.
a whole system. So
And some would even say the accreditation standard is too low for what they're doing.
right? Didn't you say that?
Yeah, I don't want to put out names or anything, but
But yeah, you've heard that too. So right. So is that something we'll pursue? It's not time for us to pursue it now. Do we want to be an excellent school? Yes.
Yeah.
and we're not just winging this.
Right.
We have partnered with FACE,
Yes.
Foundations for American Christian Education. They're coaching us. There's a whole process for us to become one of their lead schools.
Yeah.
So this isn't an unknown thing that we're doing. It's,
Right.
It's
We're not
proven,
just
it's a
we're not
proven
just
model.
guessing at these things.
Right.
We're as best as we can. Certainly, we're not. We've never started a school before,
Right.
so we're new to that. We're green to that. But the people that we're surrounding ourselves with are not green to
Right.
this. We're answering the call, but we're answering it in the correct way. We're not just going, oh well, we can just do what we want. We're doing this the legal way. We're going through the right channels. We're doing the right things, whether it's, from building permits and things. And I know, Amy, earlier you and I were talking, and you had brought that up about the proper channels for building permits or whatever. But I know that Glenn was just having that conversation with me just yesterday that, he's going through those channels and has to go through those channels. And that's a conversation for another podcast. But, we talk about the building and what we're trying to do there and what we're trying to accomplish. Because I know I've scared some people in the community at the idea of, oh, wait a minute, you're going to put up a school for 1,000 students, but I mean, any school that would go in, any public school that would go in any location, they would have to, whatever channels that school would have to go through, we'll be going through those same channels. And, we certainly don't want to do anything that, our community is opposing in that way. We're not trying, we want our community to be with us. We want this to be a blessing to our community, not a,
Right.
not a eyesore or a nuisance. We want it to be a blessing to our community, what we're trying to offer. And again, I believe that when we get to that point, that 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, I think that it'll be undeniable. You bring Christ into something, and what does Christ do? He redeems. We're going to watch as Christ is redeeming our education, redeeming our student bodies, and as we see that in front of us, and families see that, and the community is seeing that, then it'll be undeniable that this must be a good thing. There must be something good happening here. Mm-hmm. So, and then I think lastly, just back to that accreditation, there's different companies that people pay. You pay money for them to evaluate and to jump through those hoops, go through that bureaucracy. You pay them to then go through that. So a lot of what you're doing there too is, can you keep up with all the demands that they've required of you? But what was brought up to us earlier was, there was a local college that might be losing their accreditation, and the perception was oh, well, if they lose their accreditation, well, then everybody's degrees mean nothing. But that's not true. That college, just an example, that college would still be giving degrees, and those degrees would still be worth just as much as they were without that accreditation. It just means they're not a part, that college would no longer be a part of that, whatever
system of accreditation.
Right. And so, absolutely can we not be accredited and still be a school? Not only is it legal, but it's also common. And so, yes, when we get to the point that we have 12th graders graduating, and if we are full-time in that way, and they're getting a diploma from us and a transcript from us, they are absolutely legitimate.
Absolutely.
With or without accreditation. So those things are not vital to whether or not we can we can start a school.
Right.
And there are pros and cons to being accredited, just like most things.
Yeah. Can you speak into any of those? I mean, would you be able to say like what are some of the I mean,
Well,
obviously
you shared about how it's also sometimes political.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to share that, but that was informative to me.
yeah, like you talked about that, like
Yeah.
I don't have experience in that, but yeah, I mean, you can, anytime you have some type of bureaucracy making decisions and you pay money to be able to have them consider you, like where, is it the gold standard or is it just a rubber stamp?
right.
Good point.
Y'all got good lines today.
good.
We want to train. We want to teach kids, not curriculum. This is the gold standard or the rubber stamp. I'm gonna write these down. This is like sermon material. But you had said like there was an engineering school at one college, and an engineering school at the other college,
Same
and
state.
in the same state, and these are state colleges, and the one couldn't have an engineering.
An undergrad.
Yeah, an undergrad. They couldn't be accredited in their engineering school.
What they did was they allowed, well, U of L was not accredited for their undergrad, but their grad. And so if you went through the grad program and did co-op for 5 year program, you were accredited. But if you only did undergrad, it wasn't accredited
But why couldn't it be accredited? Why weren't they accredited in that undergrad?
because UK had the accreditation.
Yeah, so the state had said only one could be accredited.
Yeah.
And so, again, is that a gold standard or is that a rubber stamp? That we've said
Or
only.
some political game that was played. So like you can have this piece of the pie and you can have this piece of the pie. And so I don't know. I don't know how that played out, but I worked with engineers that I was like, why are all the U of L engineers going through a co-op program, an internship program? Why, that's a requirement of your degree. And they said, well, because that's the only way to be accredited.
But not that way for UK.
Not for you, UK. Interesting. Whatever.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
They were
And-
all good engineers. I mean, you were all getting the same.
Yeah, that's the point, right?
courses.
The education is the same whether or not that accreditation was there or not.
Right.
And the degree was just as valuable, but they wanted to get to the.
Comes to money. Money.
Right. Well, and speaking of that brings us to our last topic of today, which is the money. We don't need money for accreditation, but we do need, we have to raise enough money. I mean, that's a big part of this whole endeavor, and that's part of the thing that causes, what feels like could be some of the hang up is, do you have enough money to build? Do you have enough money to hire? Do you have enough money to sustain? I think those are the big questions. And so part of our stepping out in faith has been, it's not like we started with a backing. It's not like somebody was backing this endeavor
Right.
and said, oh, well, you're good, you're golden. You can do, you can operate for this amount of years on this. We don't have a trust or a foundation that's backing us in some way. We have literally stepped out in true faith to say, Lord, if you want this, then you'll provide for this. And I think that's pretty important. I think that's important in the element of our step of faith and what's making this faith. Again, it's not based on what we can do. It's not like we were given a budget and now we can say, okay, what can we do with the budget that we're given? We're operating from the other side. We're operating from the platform of this is our vision. Is the Lord going to provide all of the things necessary? And we'll find out.
Right. We'll find out.
I mean,
It's a big leap of faith.
there's a huge leap of faith that's coming from this. But you were talking earlier just about what different people can give to, especially like what men and women want to give to, just different kind of, I don't know, the psychological side of that. And, there's really for us that because the vision is so big, there's multiple parts that people could give to. I mean, you can give to either side of that, so like one side of that would be the students, right? For the students to come, how much are we looking at per year for students to be there?
Well, let me just back up a little bit, saying that typically they say men like to give to buildings, and people like to give to buildings because it's something that, it's there, and, you can have a brick or a cornerstone.
legacy.
It's a legacy or whatever.
Permanent
And,
legacy.
Yeah, and sometimes people like to give to like sponsor a student, and stuff like that. And but most people don't enjoy giving to, from what we hear anyways, the whole making it happen, the administration and things like that. They eventually think that you should be able to get that from tuition. And that's just a mentality. That doesn't mean it's the right mentality. I think the vision that you have and that you are wanting the church at large to see is that the problem is so great. The rift is so great that if the church doesn't step up and do something that it literally can't do on its own, like the church, the body of Christ can't do. If we can't see how to do it, but if we don't step up and do it, who will? So we have to actually retrain our minds to say, I want to give to a church who is willing to do something about it, whether I get my name on a brick or not.
Right.
Right? Whether I get, that or not. We don't even have a place for bricks right now. We are going to we want to work with the students. So
Yeah, I think the vision also is bigger than just you're educating somebody's kid.
yeah.
It's our liberty is on the line.
Right.
I don't know how many people, don't have that concern in the U.S., no matter where they are on the political spectrum. But we're losing the battle in education compared to other nations. We're losing the battle for our kids to be able to understand, what freedoms they do have and could be giving up because they're not educated. It's a bigger vision than just, this many people in this little community are going to be educated in a Christian worldview, which is great. It's
Our whole
scary
nation
to think about that we have dumbed down our nation to the point. I sat and watched a movie with my daughter, who's 19, last night, that just came. Well, actually, it's a TV series about. I can't remember the title of it. It's on Netflix, but it's the history of World War II and leading up to the bombs and all these things, and the amount of things she did not know about history. She didn't even know that we had actually dropped nuclear bombs. She said, did that really happen?
Wow. Yeah.
And yes, this is why we're in, these strategic political wars now because of the nuclear bomb. There's a lot that's somehow been omitted from their education in public schools. And she wasn't a kid that skipped school, or she was the pleaser. She wanted to learn and wanted to do the right thing. So for me to know that she was doing what she needed to and got good grades, but wasn't given enough knowledge to know where we stand as a nation.
Right.
It's
I actually think there's
disturbing.
an agenda in education, whether teachers are aware of it or not. But I think there's an agenda to actually, not raise children that know what liberty is and know how to protect it and defend it, so that we will lose our liberties as a country. So that, I don't know if it's globalism, that, if it's this one world order globalism, but whatever it is, America has a unique beginning, and it's to be preserved. We have a unique beginning, and we don't even know what it is anymore because we haven't been taught, because it's been purposely covered over.
Yeah.
And I think somebody said one time that the devil marries a truth with a lie. And that's another great one. It's like, he marries a truth with a lie. There's a truth in there somewhere but he twists it, and he marries it and joins it with a lie. And I think that's what's happened in education.
Charles Spurgeon used to say that that discernment wasn't just being able to tell right from wrong, but being able to tell right from almost right. He actually would say it's to not tell right from wrong, because even a child could do that. Even a child can look and say that's right or that's wrong, but it's being able to tell right from almost right. And I think there's a lot of things that when we look at education, you can see how they're almost right, but there's a gap, and we can see that we're missing that gap. I think maybe the population at large looks at that gap and says, well, what is it? What are we missing? Like why would my daughter not know these things? She was a good student, got good grades. She tried hard. She was, part of extra things. Why doesn't she know those things? But I think it comes back to us. What we're saying would be that that's why we need to put Christ back into education. And that's why there needs to be a passion for education. Certainly not implying that there's not public school teachers that have passion for education. They certainly do, but they're part of a system that has a different agenda than what we just described. And then you have to ask yourself as a believer, do you believe that Christ is the Redeemer? Can he redeem that? We say it, I'll say it from the pulpit, he can redeem your marriage, he can redeem can Christ, if invited there, can Christ redeem education. And that's the leap of faith that we're taking.
Right.
And that's the part we're asking people to give to, is to say, do you believe that bringing Christ back into education will redeem that education, and that the end result of that could be, and I believe will be, the redemption of an entire nation and education of an entire nation. That you'll have more than just, like you were saying, more than just a small little community of believers who, small little church that now has a biblical worldview. The vision goes much bigger than that. And that's why I think that on the one hand, if you view it as a small school out in the middle of nowhere, then it's going to be hard for you to get your mind around why you would want to give to that. But if you can catch the vision of there's a bigger mission field here that goes way beyond us, that goes way beyond our ourselves and our little church, or some person who might be wanting to give, it goes way beyond us, that there's a big thing that we're trying to go for here, which is
The harvest is ripe.
it's
The laborers are few. We're
That's
looking
right.
for the laborers.
Yeah.
Yeah. The harvest is right. And I think the other thing that came to my mind is that part of the problem, I think, with education is because they have taken the soul out of the child in their philosophy of education, they can't give a holistic education.
yeah.
And I think we are looking for a holistic education. We want the whole child. We want their spirit, their soul, and their mind redeemed. We want them to grow in Christ and Christian character. And that's why we want to form a biblical worldview in ourselves and in our children that can sustain the liberty that we have. And that takes Christian character and Christian self-government. I have a similar testimony with the word character. And I'm supposed to be homeschooling my kids. We moved here in 99, and I didn't know what it meant, character. I was like, well, is that somebody in a play, in a book, in a show? A character is somebody in a movie. I didn't know, what does it mean? I got these books. I'm supposed to be teaching my kids to have Christian character. Oh, well, what's Christian character? I had no idea. It took me a while, like it did for you with the worldview. It's like, well, what is you can't teach your child something you don't have or you don't know.
Yeah.
Which is another reason that I'm in supportive of this and want even homeschool parents to learn, and parents in general. I feel like there's discipleship for all of us because we all need a biblical worldview and may not have that, right? But I didn't know what Christian character was. How was I going to give my kids something I didn't have?
Yeah.
So there's an education. We're all in some place of learning. We're all on some road of growing and learning. So we want to have a holistic education. We want to disciple the whole child.
Yeah.
And I think that I hate to say, but if you take God and the soul and you're just a genetic modification, or you're just a genetic, it's a eugenics background, right? That's not our country. We founded on the fact that that there was a creator. And then therefore that the individual that was created had a divine purpose. So we want to come back to that divine purpose that we were created for. Yeah. And we can't get that if the basis of our education is eugenics or evolution. And we don't know where you came from or how it happened. It's just some big blur, but you're here. How do you get any standard of morality out of that? And for our form of government, it takes individual Christian self-government. And I say Christian because Christ in you is how we can govern ourselves, right? So it takes self-government. It takes Christian character. It takes godliness to govern yourself. And you do that based on the Word with the Holy Spirit. That's how our country was intended. Now we're just full of captured institutions and a lot of problems. And obviously the enemy has for years been sowing into all these institutions. And so all we know to do is to start something new with God, come at this afresh and start something new with God and try to plant something that will give him glory and will bring life change to individuals, teachers, staff, and children.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we have to recognize when we talk about the giving is you're giving to something bigger than, I'm paying for somebody else's student so they don't have to, for somebody else's child so they don't have to. It's not a matter of paying for somebody so they don't have to. It's a matter of, catching the big vision of we're trying to restore something that's been lost.
Right.
And it's bigger than just, I got that one kid, even though I think there's still value there. I remember this little story my old pastor told one time. He said there was a boy out on the, he was out on the shore, the ocean, and there was all these starfish all over the sand. And he walked over and he was picking up the starfish and he's throwing them out in the water. He's picking up starfish, throwing them out in the water. And this old man comes walking by and he goes, "Young man, you're never going to save all those starfish." And the little boy picked up one more and throws it out in the water and goes, "Yeah, but I saved that one." And I think that it's a similar way, there's the big picture that we have. And then there is the part that comes down to the local level that says, yeah, and we're saving these,
Right.
that's the goal.
Right.
And so I think that's what we're doing. And I'd like to even suggest too that, for some people, I think there's the idea of like, the big, you need some foundation or some corporate sponsor, whatever to get behind this. But that's not necessarily true either. There's strength in numbers. And I think if the individual, if you have a heart for this and you're behind this, then be creative. Can you be creative and say, you know what, I'm so behind this that I'd be willing to give X. I could do something. I heard of a church that was raising money, and there was a young man that took a paper route. I don't know if those are even a thing anymore, but he took a paper route and donated. He agreed, I'll take the paper route, and he gave everything that he got from the paper route. He gave it to the church's whatever thing. I think that's the whole part. Is like, can we get creative and say, look, if you're really behind it, don't look at me and say I'm behind it, but I don't know how to give. Well, you probably could. I mean, you could probably do something. Could you find some way to say I can get behind this? If the first step that we have to get is we have to have enough money to operate. I mean, we can't go much further until we have the funding to do that. I think that's one of the issues is you have to be funded to buy, even just to buy the drywall and the studs. And even though I think we have enough now that we'll be able to do that, but we have to hire those teachers. We're not asking these teachers to volunteer. And so I think that my encouragement to anybody would be to say, if you're behind this vision to say we want to restore education in our country, then get behind it. Get behind it in every way possible. I would say right now that might look like, getting creative with giving, but in the future that would look like, would you be willing to step out and look at your church and ask your church to do this?
Right.
Would you be willing to keep an eye on this and watch for what the Lord, don't just let it go by, but keep up with it so that you can tell your pastor, tell your deacons at your church, look what they're doing. We could do this here. I'm about to make a lot of pastors mad because a lot of people are going to be like, "Hey, pastor, would you watch this podcast?" But I think the truth is that if you can get behind it, then be behind it. Don't let, like Alicia was just telling us last week, she got to a point where she was saying, what am I going to do about it? And I think that's what we're at right now too, is saying,
Right.
well, what are you going to do about it? We're stepping out to do something. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to get behind it, or, continue to, like the German church, sit to the side and
God forbid.
God forbid.
I mean, God forbid.
Yeah.
And so I have to hope that there are plenty of believers out there. They may or may not be in our area, but that the Lord has blessed very well. And you get to a point in your life where you go, I want to leave a legacy, and it's between you and God, right? It's between you and God, really. Does it really need to be because your name is on something? Mm-hmm. Or is it between you and God? Like, you aren't taking it with you when you go.
Yeah.
And, to be able to pour into a nation of children. And, your vision is much bigger than Oldham, Trimble, Henry, wherever our reach is. It's to the churches everywhere, is start getting involved with children. And there's more than just Sunday school and Wednesday night in church. We really need to get involved in education.
Yeah.
And so with that, I have to believe that there are believers who the Lord has blessed all over the country, probably all over the world, that just need to start seeing that, hey, I can leave a legacy with what God's given me, with He's given me these talents, right? And what is the parable about the talents is you don't go and hide it. You do something with your talents. So whether it's money or time or whatever, but I just have to believe that it's going to have to be broader than just our little body of Christ where we are serving right now. It's broader than that. It's bigger than that. But I think there's some people out there that once they really catch the vision, that they can change the future of our nation. That's what the children are. They're our future. They're the future of this nation. And I think that's the other reason why we're in such a trouble we are, is that we haven't been investing in our children and in the future generations. And if we don't, where are we going? So I think what we're doing and the fact that God has inspired this, to me, gives me hope. It gives me hope that God has a hope for the future here. Like he wants this in our country. It gives me hope. And because you can watch a lot of stuff and be very hopeless right now. Yeah. Right? I mean, you could really be hopeless. I meet people that are like, I can't, I would not even have kids in this world because it's so bad and I just don't even want to have kids. Well, that's not the answer, right? I mean, I understand it. I could be really hopeless too, just watching all the stuff that's going on. But I think we're coming here and saying, let's join God in making a difference and give hope to the children in this nation. And, you know, we're starting something. I don't know, and we're planting, and we're doing the hard ground right now.
Yeah, that's right. We got some blasting to do.
Yes,
We're soil softening.
Yes, we're soil softening from hard soil.
I'm just reminded as you're talking of a verse in the New Testament that says, "To him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is a sin." If we know that we're supposed to do, if God's calling us to something, we know we're supposed to do it, and we don't do it, that's a sin.
Yeah, it's the first time.
And yeah, there you go.
Sin of
well, I mean,
omission.
it's what happens when you sit at the table with a pastor.
That's the sin of omission, right?
Yeah, that's
you're
right.
omitting something. The Lord has you to do something, but you're omitting it, and you just omit yourself. And
I think about all those people through these last few years, the cognitive dissonance. People have tuned out all of the horrible things that we keep being bombarded by, but they're not doing anything. They're just checked out. And it's like,
time to check back in.
sad.
and we all need to be doing something if we care. We all need to be doing something, and God has something for you to do.
Yeah.
He does. He has something for you to do.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that, you know, we've all stepped into, to say yes to God.
That's right. And so we're inviting others to jump in and say yes with us.
Certainly are.
So,
yes.
well, I think that's a good place to end for today. So we'll see if I can convince y'all to come back with me next week and not leave me all on my own. So thank y'all for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.